Our next guest is Marina Weisband. Allow me to introduce her a little bit. She was born in Kiev, and so she obviously has a very clear view on everything that has been going on in Ukraine and is affected on a very personal level. You've been obviously on countless talk shows and podcasts sharing your view. And so I'm really grateful that you're sharing your opinions with us today. You're wearing many hats. You're a psychologist and an educator, a publicist. You are with Bündnis 90 Die Grünen in Germany. You are co-chair of the Digital Political Association D64. You lead the aula project. You speak on very a big amount of issues, different issues. What are the main issues you focus on and that concern you, if you can break that down?
Thank you. So I'd say that disregarding the terrible branding that I have, speaking on many topics, I think that all these topics actually have much in common. And the main issue I speak about is democracy and self-efficacy. It's the feeling that people have that they are not just consumers or victims of their society, but they are creators, they are active participants, and they are responsible. And that is something that concerns the development of Ukraine since the Maidan times, where people got together and kind of took responsibility for their own politics. This concerns my work with students in schools with the aula project, which is actually my main job. And this is the headline for all my anti-fascist, pro-democracy work.
I don't think it's a terrible branding. I think you're just very busy. It seems you're very busy and you have a lot of insight, and a lot of people want to talk about that. How do you stay focused on like a personal daily level? Do you have an agenda? Do you have a to-do list? Do you wake up and you're like, I feel like doing this, or I feel like today I should focus on that? Like, how do you stay organized?
So my personality is I'm actually a very disorganized, chaotic human. I've been so from birth. I do have ADHD and I work not professionally. And I think there is value in that because I always speak from the heart. I never script my appearances. I never, I'm sometimes asked, oh, can I have your speech in writing? And I don't have a speech in writing. But the thing is, I am chronically ill. So I do have very little energy for the day, less than 50% actually. So I do have to be much more organized than it used to be. I do have an assistant and I try to prioritize, but I think my main thing is I don't work, if I don't have a deadline, I don't work on things that I have no motivation to do, because I know when I work on something that I'm motivated for right now, I show up as the best, most focused version of myself. And if I feel like, oh, I don't really feel like writing this text, it won't be a good text even if I push myself to write it.
So you're not forcing yourself to do things if they just don't work on that day.
Yeah, I kind of roll with my motivation because my life isn't survivable otherwise.
And motivation is actually the next keyword I want to talk about. Very often these are difficult, frustrating, sad topics. How do you find motivation and strength to keep going? Maybe even in moments where you feel like, I don't know if anything is happening at all or if it's ever going to change. I mean, change is obviously a big motivation for you trying to achieve that.
Yes, yes. So, first of all, I'm not always motivated. I'm sometimes very frustrated, and sometimes I even gave up on a couple of topics. In 2015, I got so many rape and death threats that I just stopped talking about Ukraine. And then I only started again in 2022. The other thing is I do have a daughter. So when I think of her future, I know that it's really important fighting for. Um, and I do work with children a lot and they fight. And that is something that gives me immense motivation because when I see young people who organize, who do climate protests, that is something that fills you up with energy, even just being there. I try to take things with humor. I try to make things pretty. So when I have a notebook or I have an outfit, I put flowers on it. I put flowers on my wheelchair. I try to design um, everything in my surrounding to be pretty because it gives me power over the situation. It's a kind of self-efficacy. And that's also part of my motivation. And surround yourselves with people who inspire you and who inspire each other.
Yeah, I can very well relate to that. When it comes to Ukraine, maybe just as a question on kind of like the broad public and social media, are you worried that people don't see the urgency anymore or forget about it? Because I read a social media post the other day, and it was from a big German media outlet. So it wasn't, like some dark space in the internet. And the same people, or maybe they're not the same people, but people who were waiting for refugees at the train stations, all of the sudden were like, why would you complain about the conditions you're staying in now in Germany? You're so lucky to be here. You should be grateful. Are these just a few people that have always been there and we just didn't hear them over all the other wonderful people, or has it turned?
I think that's something that was to be expected. German people reacted wonderfully to the crisis and with huge solidarity. But solidarity isn't, it's not something that stays forever. During a crisis, people show solidarity and then it kind of, you get used to the crisis and the solidarity wanes. And there's another effect. People who are addicted to growth, as Western societies are, in meager times, um, there is not much growth in terms of upward mobility. So there is only growth in taking away something from other people. So people tend to become more tribal in meager times, in lean times. And that's what's happening now. Gas prices are rising. So people are, of course, more focused on their situation. And it's not an evil thing. It's expected. The thing is, we just can't allow Putin to win with his interpretation of events that helping Ukraine was responsible for our rising gas prices, because it wasn't. Our rising gas prices are the result of 20 years building this huge addiction to one source of gas and to fossil fuels as a whole. So this narrative mustn't become mainstream, but otherwise, I don't think solidarity, this active solidarity, is something that is sustainable. I think we need to shift more towards sustainable solutions like energy independency, international solidarity in terms of policy, and so on.
So with looking ahead, what do you think is going to happen with these so-called referendums that are being held in like some partially or almost completely occupied territories? What do you think is going to happen?
So I can tell you right now, the result of the referendums, it'll be around 80% in favor of being part of Russia, and Putin will give a speech and he will offer the Oblast of Kherson to be part of Russian territory. And then, of course, these occupied territories will be Russia. And when Ukrainians try to free them, this will be an attack on Russian soil, allegedly. The playbook here is pretty open and pretty simple. It's very obvious that from the voting machines, the manipulated voting machines, to just people being forced to vote at gunpoint, literally. There is not much surprise to be had there. But I was just right now on the phone with our German newspaper, and they were like, oh yeah, when the referendum results come in, there'll be a bit of movement in the topic. And I thought, what movement? What exactly are you waiting for? We know the results. We know the whole playbook. We know our goal here. Why? And I'm afraid we'll see all over German media, all the headlines with, I don't know, referendum results are so and so. And this is, of course, just confusion, because there can be no referendum, there can be no surprising results, no developing story. It's just the old story. And we do not anticipate. We always keep just reacting to Putin's narratives.
I mean, it's ingenious in an evil way to say this is what Ukrainians want. See, I gave them the chance to voice their opinion on that.
No, I don't think it's genius. I just think our media is stupid for believing that. It's not genius. It's just a basic evil plan. But there's nothing genius in that if people do not believe it, if people do not talk about it as if it were a real referendum.
True. Yeah, true. It depends on the other side as well and how they view the outcome. What do Ukrainians hope for, and what do they allow themselves kind of to hope for? Like, what is realistic, but what is enough hope to keep going?
I don't know if hope is a word that applies, at least from the people I talk to. It's not hope. It's just the conviction that Ukraine must win and that they will fight until they win, until they chase all Russian soldiers back over the border. That's the goal. And there is no other choice. So people aren't talking about, should we give up or surrender? Or no, it's not a topic of discussion. It's just, yeah, we will fight. Of course we will. We have no other choice.
Mm-hmm. So it's a day-to-day, and the concept of hope is not really one, or it's a luxury. It would be a luxury
it's a luxury. Yeah, I think so, because right now it's just focus, and everybody fights in their own way, and it's really difficult to keep up morals. I know that the government is actually communicating really well to the people, and they instill a lot of hope because they give the scenarios. They're not out there, they're realistic scenarios, but they always show the paths that are realistic and that one can hope for. But it's not like, oh, I imagine a world in which we will be free. No, it's much more practical hope.
I would like to try to tie the conversation to why we're talking today, to our annual Women's Summit, and about talking to and about superwomen, or women that can work under that motto of the superwoman. And while I do not think personally we should treat female leaders, entrepreneurs, politicians, artists any different from their male counterparts, there lies a big advantage, I guess, in diversity and in diverse decision making in the end. Where do you see the strength of diversity kind of come in big decision making, especially when it comes to gender?
Look, the obvious thing here is different experiences growing up, different socialization. Women just see the world maybe in a more realistic light because they haven't been shielded from so much. More so women of color, more so other marginalized women. But I think one of the most interesting points is when we fight against injustice and we fight against fascism, which is on the rise in Europe and which is on the rise in the US as well. Fascists need groups that they can perpetually fight against, because you can only legitimize dictatorship and taking rights away from people when you have an enemy. And the Soviet Union wasn't a good enemy because they just dissolved. The war on drugs wasn't a good enemy because people can't stop taking drugs, but people can't stop being minorities. They can't stop being Black, they can't stop being trans or gay, and they can't stop being women. So I think a lot of power actually lies in being of the group that has historically the largest experience with marginalization, misogyny being one of the oldest tropes of gaining power. I think we are in the best position to dismantle these structures of power that represses people. And I think it's necessary for us to be in solidarity with all the other marginalized people and in honest, not just to sell our brand or to be girl boss. but in honest, to build solidarity and to fight structures of power that oppress not only us, but human rights as a whole.
Well, that sounds a little hopeful when it comes to this. So maybe there's some hope in this topic. Marina, thank you so much for joining us and for sharing so openly. I wish you and your family as well the best in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much.